You know, there's this persistent myth in project management, and especially in construction, that the taking over certificate is the finish line.
Oh, absolutely.
We have this mental image of the ribbon cutting, the handshake, the final invoice is paid, and the contractor just drives off into the sunset. The project is done.
Which, as anyone who has actually managed a major project knows, is usually when the real headaches start.
Right.
That whole sunset period is legally distinct, it's financially dangerous, and technically very complex.
Hmm.
In the FIDIC Red Book, which is our Bible for today, the project doesn't just end at taking over.
Yeah.
It enters a kind of a purgatory, really. It's called the Defects Notification Period, or DNP.
And that's exactly what we are deep diving into today. Eddy Clause 11, defects after taking over. I spent some time with the Red Book text this week, and honestly, it reads less like a warranty and more like a prenuptial agreement for a breakup that takes, 2 years to finalize?
That's a very, very good way to put it. I mean, think about it. During construction, the contractor controls the site.
They're the king of the castle.
Exactly. But during the DNP, the employers is using the asset. The power plant is generating electricity. Tenants are in the skyscraper. But the contractor is still on the hook.
And that creates this huge friction, right?
Right.
Contractor wants out, they want their retention money.
And the employer is thinking, this is my last chance to get things fixed for free. It's a tense period.
So let's start with the basic obligation, Clause 11.1. The text says the contractor has to complete outstanding work and remedy defects.
Right.
Now, the outstanding work part seems pretty straightforward. That's just the punch list stuff, the minor things on the taking over certificate.
It is, but you shouldn't underestimate the logistics of that. The contractors probably demobilized their main workforce.
Oh, sure.
So bringing a crew back to install 3 door handles or calibrate one sensor is disproportionately expensive. But the second part of 11.1 is the real heavy hitter,
The new defect.
the obligation to fix any new defects that appear during the DNP.
Okay, this is where I want to drill down because the clause uses that phrase, fair wear and tear accepted. In a high-use facility, let's say a mining plant or a busy airport, the line between this broke because you built it wrong and this broke because we're using it 24/7, that seems incredibly blurry.
It is the single biggest source of disputes in this entire period. Fair wear and tear is a defense for the contractor.
Okay.
If a bearing wears out in a pump after 5,000 hours and the spec says it lasts 5,000 hours, that is not a defect. That's just life.
Right. But what if it seizes up at 500 hours?
Then the employer will argue it's a defect, either in the materials or the workmanship.
For the design, if the contractor was responsible for that.
Correct. And this is where the engineer, the contract administrator, has to step in and make a really tough technical call.
The process described for this in the text is interesting. It says there has to be a joint inspection.
Yes.
So it's not just the employer sending a photo and a bill.
No. And that's a protection for both sides. The employer can't just fix things in secret and then claim the money back. Clause 11.1 requires the employer to give notice, and then the parties inspect it together.
So you're forced to agree on the scope of the problem first.
Exactly. Before any money gets spent.
Now let's say we have a major failure. Not a door handle, but something systemic. Clause 11.3 deals with the extension of defects notification period. The text says the DNP can be extended if the works cannot be used for the purposes for which they are intended. That sounds like a pretty high bar to clear.
It is a high bar. A flickering light in a hotel lobby doesn't stop you from using the hotel.
Sure.
But if the HVAC system fails and you can't legally occupy the rooms, that's a different story. The logic here is just commercial fairness. The employer paid for a 12-month warranty period operational use.
So if the building is broken for 3 months, the clock just stops.
The clock stops. They haven't received what they paid for.
But not indefinitely. I did notice there's a hard cap in there.
Yes, the 2-year cap. Super important. The DNP cannot be extended by more than 2 years beyond its original expiry date. This is crucial for the contractor's insurers. They're bonding companies.
You can't have this open-ended liability forever.
You can't. You can't have a bond held hostage for a decade because the air conditioning keeps glitching. There has to be a final sunset, even on a bad project.
There was also a weird little bit in 11.3 about suspension that caught my eye. If the employer suspends delivery of plant or materials.
Ah, yes. That's for the zombie project scenario.
The what?
The zombie project. Imagine you've built a massive turbine. It's ready to ship, but the employer says, stop, our site isn't ready, just hold it in your warehouse.
And years go by.
Exactly. Without that clause, the contractor would be liable for that turbine forever. The clause says that liability dies 2 years after the DNP would have expired, even if it never left the warehouse. It forces the employer's hand.
Okay, let's shift to the money, because someone has to write a check. Clause 11.2, cost of remedying defects. It seems binary. Either the contractor pays or the employer pays.
It is.
But the reasons why the contractor pays go beyond just, bad concrete.
Right. Obviously, they pay for bad design, bad materials, bad workmanship. But there's a fourth category in 11.2 that catches people out.
Which is?
Failure by the contractor to comply with any other obligation.
Yeah.
This includes the operation manuals.
That's what I wanted to ask about. So if I build a perfectly good, complex machine, but the manual I provide is confusing, and the employer's team breaks the machine because they followed my bad instructions, I'm liable.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
In modern FIDIC, the works include the documentation. If the as-built records or the O&M manuals are defective, and that causes physical damage.
It's treated the same as using cheap steel.
Exactly the same. The contractor can't just shout user error if the user guide was the problem.
And if it's not the contractor's fault, say vandalism or the employer just overloaded a circuit?
Then it's treated as a variation. The contractor still does the work, but they get paid for it.
Which brings us to one of the most dramatic parts of this whole section, I think. Clause 11.8, contractor to search.
Yes.
It sounds like a detective novel, but financially it sounds like high-stakes gambling.
It is, essentially. I mean, let's paint a picture. You have a crack in a road surface. The employer thinks it's bad sub-base compaction. So, the contractor's fault.
And the contractor thinks it's something else. Unforeseen ground movement, maybe? Employer's risk?
But nobody knows for sure because the evidence is buried under a foot of asphalt.
So the engineer just orders the contractor to dig it all up.
To search for the cause. That's the instruction. And here's the gamble. The contractor has to front the cost of the search. They bring in the excavators, they rip up the road. If they find bad compaction,
They lose.
they lose everything. They pay for the search and the repair.
Wow. But if they dig it up and find out the soil shifted because of, I don't know, a tiny earthquake?
Then the employer pays for everything. They pay cost plus profit for the search, and they pay for the repair as a variation.
So it puts this huge burden on the engineer to be right.
It does. It effectively stops the employer from going on a fishing expedition for defects. You only order a search if you're pretty certain of what you're going to find.
Okay, so let's game out the worst case scenario. Clause 11.4, failure to remedy. The contractor gets the notice, they've done the inspection, they just aren't fixing it. What can the employer actually do?
This is the escalation ladder. Step 1 is administrative. The employer sets a reasonable date. You have to fix this by the 15th.
Okay.
If that date passes, the employer suddenly has 4 options at their sole discretion. And this is where the contractor loses all control.
Option 1 is hire someone else.
Yes. The employer brings in a third party. The original contractor pays all the reasonable costs. But there's a hidden trap here for the employer. If I hire a new contractor to fix your wiring, you were no longer liable for that wiring. I've broken the chain. If the new guy messes it up, I can't come back to you.
That's a huge risk. You trade a free repair for losing your warranty. What about option 2, just accepting the defect?
This happens more than you'd think. Let's say a wall is 2 degrees out of plumb. It's safe, it's just ugly. Tearing it down is too disruptive.
So the employer just says, fine, we'll live with it.
They say, I'm keeping it, but I'm reducing the contract price. You gave me a crooked wall, so I'm deducting 50 grand from your final payment. It's a retroactive discount.
And option 3 was treat as omission. How is that different?
It's similar, but technically distinct. It's an accounting move, really. You just treat the useless work as if it was never instructed in the first place.
Which leaves the last one, option 4, the nuclear option.
Termination. And termination under 11.4 is severe. It applies if the defect deprives the employer of substantially the whole benefit of the works.
We're not talking about a leaky roof here.
No. We're talking about a power plant that can't connect to the grid, a processing plant that produces toxic sludge instead of clean water.
And if they pull that trigger, what happens to the money?
It's a catastrophe for the contractor. The employer can recover all sums paid for that part of the works, plus financing costs, plus the cost to dismantle it and clear the site.
Wow. They don't just lose their profit, they have to pay for the demolition of their own work.
It's a total unwind of the deal.
That really puts the whole defect conversation in perspective.
Okay,
moving on to Logistics Clause 11.5, remedying of defective work off-site.
Right.
This seems necessary for heavy industry. You can't exactly fix a generator rotor in a hallway.
Correct. But from an employer's point of view, letting a piece of equipment leave the site is terrifying. You've already paid for that rotor. If the contractor takes it to their factory and then goes bankrupt, you've lost your asset.
So 11.5 creates a kind of collateral requirement.
Yes. The employer can demand the contractor increase their performance security, their bank guarantee, by the full replacement value of the item before it leaves.
It's a hostage exchange.
You take my rotor, I take a claim on your bank account. That's the deal.
Then there's 11.7, right of access. The project is operational now. The employer can't just have contractors walking in and out whenever they want.
But the contractor has to get in to do the work. It's a natural conflict of interest.
Yeah.
The contractor wants in, fix it, get out, stop the bleeding. The employer wants to minimize disruption. So 11.7 says the contractor has to give notice, and the employer can't unreasonably say no.
And there's a penalty if the employer drags their feet.
Yeah, if the employer unreasonably delays access, the contractor can claim costs.
Yeah.
And more importantly, if they just block access entirely, the contractor might actually be relieved of the obligation to fix it at all.
You can't demand a repair and then lock the door.
You can't.
So once the repair is finally done, Clause 11.6 requires further tests. It's not enough to just say, I fixed it.
No, you have to prove it works. And the sting in the tail here is that these tests are at the risk and cost of whoever was liable for the defect in the first place.
We're getting near the end of the timeline now. Clause 11.9, the performance certificate, this is the real finish line.
Legally, yes. The taking over certificate just starts the clock on the DNP. The performance certificate is the end of the contract.
It's the moment the contractor is officially discharged.
It is. It's issued 28 days after the DNP expires, and it basically says, we're square, the obligations are met.
But the part I found fascinating, and frankly a bit terrifying for employers, is the deemed issue provision.
Ah, yes.
If the engineer just falls asleep at the wheel and doesn't issue the certificate on time?
The contractor wins by default. If the time passes and the engineer hasn't issued the certificate or given a reason why not, it is deemed to have been issued.
It's a silence equals consent mechanism.
It is. It forces administrative competence. You can't hold the contractor hostage just by refusing to do your paperwork.
So the certificate is issued. Is the contractor totally free? Clause 11.10 mentions unfulfilled obligations.
Well, there's always a bit of a tail. If there was some specific obligation that wasn't met, the contract stays in force just for that issue.
Okay.
And generally speaking, liability for plant. So machinery cuts off 2 years after the DNP. But, and this is a big legal but, that doesn't override the law in cases of fraud, gross negligence, or reckless misconduct.
So if the contractor knowingly installed dangerous wiring and covered it up, they can't just waive the performance certificate in court and say, you accepted it?
No. Fraud unravels everything. You cannot contract your way out of the consequences of your own deceit.
And finally, Clause 11.01, clearance of site. The cleanup. This feels like the landlord checking the apartment after you move out.
It is. The contractor has 28 days to remove all their temporary works, their equipment, their rubbish. If they don't, the employer can sell it.
That's the part that surprised me. They don't just store it, they can actually liquidate it.
They can. They sell it, use the money to pay for the clearance, and if there's a deficit, the contractor owes them the balance. It's a very practical solution to the problem of abandoned scaffolding.
So looking at Clause 11 as a whole, it really just dismantles this idea that a project is a linear path to one single end date. It's more like a gradual decoupling of liability.
That's the best way to see it. It's a risk transfer mechanism. At taking over, operational risk shifts to the employer. During the DNP, defect risk stays with the contractor.
And at the performance certificate.
The contractual risk mostly evaporates, leaving only statutory liability for things like fraud. It's a tapered exit, not a cliff edge.
And for you listening, whether you're managing these huge contracts or even just hiring someone for a smaller project, the lesson seems to be about definition. If you don't define wear and tear or the end date or who pays for the search, you're just setting yourself up for a fight.
Absolutely. Knowledge of the contract is the only thing that stops the DNP from becoming a litigious nightmare. If you know the rules like contractor to search or the deemed issue, you can manage the outcome. If you ignore Clause 11 until a pipe bursts, it's already too late.
And I'll leave you with this final thought on that deemed issue clause. In a contract that could be worth hundreds of millions, the ultimate release of liability can happen simply because a contract administrator missed a deadline on their calendar. It's a sobering reminder that in the world of FIDIC, silence isn't just golden sometimes. Silence is legally binding approval.
A very expensive silence indeed.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.